All right, so we're going to talk about our division and fraction problems that have two steps, okay? So we did a lot of division and fraction problems with one step, but I just want to make sure you guys, once you get to a two-step one, you don't think, oh, this is something different and I don't know how to do this now. You should hopefully be able to do them this way as well. So two-step equations with division and fraction. So what is the inverse of division? Remember, inverse means opposite, so the inverse of division would be multiplication, right? And the inverse of a fraction, remember, we know what it looks like. It's that flipped fraction. So if we have 2 over 3, we have 3 over 2. But what is it called? It is called a reciprocal. If you forget, you should hear me say that a lot this year, and so hopefully you'll remember. So what is the inverse of 1 over 2? If we took it, we would say 2 over 1, which can also be simplified then down just to 2, right? So 2 over 1. If we write it that way, that's fine, but really we just need the 2. And 3 over 4, right, the opposite would be 4 over 3. You can write it sideways like that, or you can write it like this, right? Those two things mean the same thing. So in today's practice, we're going to be using those reciprocals again, but we're going to have two steps in the problem. So today we will solve equations, two steps, reciprocals. Okay, so to undo these equations, we will use the two steps of addition or subtraction, right? Addition or subtraction, okay? And multiplication. Oops, multiplication, I forgot my C. And division. So let's look at our first example. Okay, we have equations with division, right? So we have an x is being divided by 3, and then we have an 8 being added to it. So again, if we see what's being done to the problem, right, it has a divide of 3, and it also has a positive 8, right? So x is being divided by 3, and then 8 is added to it. Well, the opposite of those are subtracting 8 and multiplying by 3. And as we know, we work in reverse order, right? Because we're undoing something, just like when you get your shoes on, you don't do it before you get your pants on, right? Because you wouldn't be able to get your pants on very easily. So you need to undo things in reverse order. So you take your shoes off when you get home, right? And then you go from there. So let's look at this one. If this is a positive 8, we're going to do a minus 8, right? But we're going to do it on both sides. So these two are going to cancel, and we get x over 3 equals negative 21 minus 8 should give me a negative 29. I've got two negatives, combining them, I've got more negatives, right? And then the second step would be to multiply by that x. That number is divided by x, right? So here we have x divided by 3, and here we want to multiply by 3, right, on both sides, so we can get rid of the division part of it. So 3 and 3 cancel on the left side, and we'll just have x equals, well, what is negative 29 times 3, right? You might think, I can't do that part in my head. Well, again, we can do any of these in our calculator if we need to. Make sure you try to use that negative button down at the bottom. This is the negative button. This is the minus button. If I zoom out for a second, let's see what happens if I press the negative button. Okay, in this case, it actually didn't work, but let me put another problem here. Okay, so this was here. If I press the minus button, I'm going to zoom out so you can see which one I'm pressing. If I press the minus button first and say that that's a negative, when I press that, it's going to take the answer above and subtract from it. So it's going to take 225 and say, well, I'm subtracting 29 from that, right? And then I also need to multiply by 3, right? So it'll multiply by this one first, and then it'll subtract from 229, which is not the answer we want. So when we're pressing the negative button, we want to make sure we use the negative button, which is this one. So then it doesn't do that. It doesn't take the previous answer. So negative 29 times a positive 3, right, should give me a negative 87. So if you didn't get negative 87, it's probably because you used the minus button instead of the negative button, right? And when you're putting it in, the first thing you put in your calculator, it's important that you use that negative button, okay? Just the calculator thinks about those two things a little differently. All right, so I'm going to do a pause. You try the one next to it and then come back and check. Okay, so hopefully up on that first one, you got a negative 126, right? Subtracted your 7, multiplied by your 6, and that ended you up with negative 126. The new ones that you're going to do just beneath this are really the same thing. It's just that the x is on the other side of the equation. So I still see that x is being divided by 2. That's my first thing I see. And then I see that there's a subtracting of 7. Well, the opposite of those things would be adding 7 and multiplying by 2. So I'm going to do those in reverse order, right? So we have a plus 7 on both sides. That gives me x over 2 equals 42 plus 7 gives me 49. And then my second step is to multiply by 2, right? I'm going to multiply by 2, and I should get 98 on the left, and these cancel on the right, and I get equals x. So x equals 98, or 98 equals x. Those two mean the same thing. So again, pause, try the one on the right that says negative 20 minus equals x over 9 minus 11.
Okay, so as you can see, the you try one, if you added 11 on the right side, you also had to add it on the left side, which means negative 20 plus 11 gives you a negative 9. And then because you had x divided by 9, you had to multiply by 9, and so negative 9 times 9 equals negative 81. So you should have gotten that. I had to edit this because it was incorrect in the first one, but moving on to the next one, you'll see the following ones change a little bit of the order of the problem.
These ones have a constant number first, okay? So we still think about our equation as two sides, but that 14's out in the front. Remember, that is a positive 14, and this is dividing by a negative 6, okay? So we see x over negative 6, and we see a positive 14, okay? I know that you don't see the plus here, but when you write it here, go ahead and write it as a positive 14. And then when you think about the opposites, right, you're going to be subtracting 14, and you're going to be multiplying by negative 6, and that will get rid of both of those things in two steps, okay? So let's do the opposite of positive 14. We're working in opposite order. We're going to subtract 14 from both sides. When you subtract 14 over here, you get 0, right? And you're left with negative x over 6, or negative 6. This one gives 7 minus 14, which gives you a negative 7. Okay, so I've got my new equation is x over negative 6 equals negative 7. And then I'm going to multiply by negative 6. I'm going to multiply by negative 6 on both sides. That cancels the negative and the 6 on this side, so I just have an x. And a 7 times a 6, right? I've got two negatives, okay? So 7 times 6 is 42, but negative 7 times negative 6 is also 42. So we get a positive 42 for our answer. So again, pause, do the you try, and I'll go to the next one. So check that, negative 40. If you're having trouble, that'd be a good time to stop and have me come over and try to clarify some things. But the negative 40, I'll flip down so you can still see it if you're looking at it. Going on to the next one. Okay, what if there's a fraction, right? A fraction is the same thing as a division, but it's a division and a multiplication together, right? So here, this is being multiplied by 3 and then divided by 2. So let's get rid of those in one step, okay? We still have, let's write this out, 3/2 x. And the other step we have is plus 16. So the opposites would be negative 16 and then 2 over 3, right? We're multiplying and dividing in the same step. So let's get rid of the 16 first, right? Because we're working in opposite order. So 22 minus 16 will give me 6, 0, and we have 3 over 2 gives me x. Well, again, if I have a 3 over 2, I can use that 2 over 3, the reciprocal, to get rid of it. So these 2 cancels, 3 cancels, and I'm left with, on the left side, x equals times 2, which is 12, and 12 divided by 3, which is 4. If you cannot do that in your head, it's okay. Use your calculator, okay, and you can times 6 times, and you can either write it as just what you see, 6 times 2, and then divide by 3, 6 times 2 divided by 3, right, as like that. Or if you want to put it in as a fraction, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you guys can see the calculator better. This fraction button is right here. So you're going to do 6 and then times and put that fraction button, that ABC, that'll give you 2 boxes, and you're going to do 2 and then press down and go 3. So again, 2 and then you press down to get to the bottom of your fraction. You can use these up and down buttons to get to those places, but you'll get the same answer either way, right? Because this 6 times 2 divided by 3 is the same thing as 6 times 2 divided by 3. All right, so zooming back in a little bit so you can see the problem. You guys are trying the second one on the you try side. So I will pause it and then you'll check your answer. All right, and the answer should be negative 20 when you got that one, okay? So you're adding 10 on both sides, and then you're multiplying by the reciprocal. So it's negative 2 over 5, so this is a 5 over negative 2. 8 times 5 is 40. 40 divided by negative 2 is negative 20. Okay, and again, if you need to do that in your calculator, you just type it in as 8 times 5 divided by negative 2. Or 8 times fraction 5 over negative 2. Either way you do it, you should get a negative 20. Okay? All right, last one. What if the fraction is outside of a parentheses? Okay, so this one's a little different, right? Just a slightly little different, because what we actually see is that the x minus 4 is the first thing that's happening to the x. These are together first because we always have to start in parentheses because of PEMDAS, right? So we see negative 4 as our first thing that happens to the x, and then after that we have a 1/2 times it, right? So the operations that we see being done, the do part, that we need to undo is in the opposite order here, because this is telling me do the x minus 4 first and then multiply by 1/2. So if I'm going to go back in reverse order, I need to do multiplying by 2 over 1, right, or multiplying by 2, and then adding 4, okay? So if I use this, I can go ahead and do the multiplying by 2 step first. I'm going to multiply on this side by 2 and multiply on this side by 2. What that's going to do is cancel that fraction out, and I'll get x minus 4 is equal to, well, what's 29 times 2, right? That should be 58, but negative 29 times 2 would be negative 50. So now I have the last step, which is I see a minus 4, so I need to do plus 4. And again, you do not have to write this, but I'm showing you kind of how that, I'm doing that on a lot of these problems. So you see some students, it really helps them to think about, okay, what's being done in this problem? How do I undo it? Okay, so here, I forgot to draw my line down the middle, sorry. The negative 4 and the positive 4 cancel, and I get x equals negative 58 plus 4. Now, some students will go 58 plus 4 is 62, but this is a negative 58, right? So I have 58 negatives and 4 positives, which means I have 54 more positives, right? So think about what that's saying. Negative 58 plus 4 should give you a negative 54. Okay, so careful when you're adding positives and negatives, make sure you are following, the logic of how many negatives and how many positives do I have, right? How many more of the bigger number do I have? I have 54 more negatives than I do positives. All right, last pause, and then you guys check the final answer. Okay, and as you can see, x equals 5 you try problems. You were getting all those right, or at least close to right, or at least you could see where you made your mistake when you look back at the work that I showed. If you are stuck and can't figure out why you were getting them wrong, please call me over before you start doing the back practice problems, okay? So on the back side, you will see, and I know my marker bleeds through when I do these practice, but I like it to be a color. You can see lots of practice problems, okay? If you are doing them and you are, getting them all right and you're feeling confident in them, you can go ahead and take the practice, the final assessment, right? The check for understanding that you're going to do, which is online, and get those answers. But I want to see that you've tried some before you do that, okay? Do you have to do every single one of these? No, but you might want to do one of each type to make sure you're getting them, and then make sure you go ahead and try the check for understanding. Okay, good luck.